What's up, everybody? Long time no see. God, we do things or we don't do things for so long, and then there's a moment of wondering, do we still know how to do this? Can we still do this? So I started writing today, and I was reflecting on what we share about our journeys and what we're taught to share about our journeys, what we learn from our environment to share about our journeys. So to share the good things, right? The things that we label, that we define as quote unquote good, and to minimize or negate or hide the things that we deem bad. And how much of life is about suffering, how much of life is about joy, and how those things not only coexist, but often exist so closely related that they almost exist as the same thing. You know, how many times have you listened to a song that has filled you with both joy and suffering, sadness and joy? Often, it happens often because life exists as both. So to be a complete person in a complete story, a complete narrative, it's about sharing both. It's about sharing the sufferings that we're walking through, and it's about sharing the joys we're walking through. And when we negate either, so when we're either sharing simply just the sufferings or just the joys, we're negating a huge aspect of our experience. We're negating ourselves in some degree. And, you know, I was just reflecting on this year and how hard this year has been for me, and how I can still place the responsibility on myself of not sharing a part of my journey, right? Okay, so sometimes it's not time yet. And so it's important to be mindful of, you know, if we're still in the depths of processing the sufferings or the joys, then maybe it's not time to share it, you know, but we know the moment when we can share, when we're able to speak about it. And I was reflecting on how I am still able to place labels upon myself. So as a spiritual teacher, as a healer, as a, you know, leader, whatever it is, I place rules and requirements on myself of needing to be in a certain place in my life. And so negating part of my story because of the limitations I've placed on myself of, or what society has placed on me, that as a healer, as a teacher, we're supposed to be in this pretty imperfect place all the time. And we do that just as people walking our path. You know, we've accepted the limitations of others. We've accepted them as our own. And then based on those limitations, we negate huge parts of who we are. Whether it's sharing our story of suffering, sharing our story of joy, we're negating these huge parts of who we are. I have an autoimmune disorder, and I've ignored it for 2 years. And it's gotten out of control this year because I've walked through more stress this year than I have in my entire life. I've also experienced joy and magic and deep union with my husband, things I've never experienced in my life this year. So it's been these extremes of both sides. And I've wanted to negate the suffering part of my story for many different reasons. But because we're taught to accept limitations. We're taught that the story must be filled with light and joy and happiness. And that's just not the truth. That's not who we are. We are suffering and we are joy in life, and we exist as both. And to be complete, then it's our responsibility to share all of those aspects of ourselves. If for no one else, then just for ourselves. To be complete, to be whole, to realize that our joys are okay, our sufferings are okay. It's okay to talk about them. It doesn't mean that we exist. When we share them, we begin to realize that our suffering is not the whole of who we are. Our joy is not the whole of who we are. It's this beautiful rendering of all of those aspects. And when we share all of the aspects of ourselves, we remember and we experience where we aren't alone. Where all of you all have suffered this year, where all of you all have experienced great joy. And in our stories of suffering and joy, we are not alone and we are complete.